So what would, is that started?
And I'll hand over to you, Jack. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Anita. So my name's Jack Soddy. So I'll be doing a sort of quick overview of project management methodologies. And if you look at this is the overview of the next 30 minutes. So we'll be looking at different institutes like the PMI, the APM, and then going into what projects are and what management leadership styles, and all the different sort of approaches which you may have heard of. And we'll look at the triple constraint, and then we'll talk through a real sort of project from start to end, so like from concept right the way to the end. And then we'll look at the timeline of how sort of the agile world came about. So I'm going to show you a slide next, which is like a summary. So this is like a graphic I created to specifically show different methodologies and how they've evolved over time. And we're going to specifically look at the sort of a life cycle here, which is the APM and also PMI. And you can see here the concept, initiating, group, and that's the beginning, and then closing and benefits. And then there's other sort of methodologies which involve software development, and that includes a maintenance period at the end. So you can see this maintenance there. And then we'll look at the sort of during the 70s, the waterfall methods, and through to the sort of today, 20, you know, in that sort of next century, using sort of the Agile Manifesto. If you looked at this, projects aren't new, and this is what PMI in their pin box say, that projects been going on for like centuries, and you can see the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, Olympic Games, the Taj Mahal, even sort of like polio vaccines, and even recently COVID. These are all sort of projects because they had to start and end, and your aircraft, moon landings, space stations, and even sort of IT infrastructure and GPS technology. So all these are branded as projects, and what they needed was a bit more of a method on how to deliver them, because business as usual was normal and people were used to it, but projects were one of these things which are new. So looking at what a project is something which is unique. And unique means we may never have done it before in its entirety, or it may be just elements of that which are unique. It's temporary, it's got a start and an end. So we need to have like an end date for it, otherwise it'd be continuous business. Because of that nature, it's temporary and it's unique, it involves a bit more risk. So, and at the end, the ultimate goal is that it does some sort of a change. So an example of that will be, we used to go to airports and check in at the actual airport, but then somebody probably initiated a project and said, why can't we do this online? And you can check in online, and that changed the behavior. So what projects do is they change the way we do something from one way to another one, and hopefully that increases the benefits to the end user. Cross-functional means that it's got elements of different skills. So different people with different skill sets will be joining the team. And again, it's only a temporary organization we're dealing with. We've got management. What is management? And management was one of those things where people sort of said, well, we need to know what people are doing. So they kind of said the English dictionary defines management as the process of dealing with or controlling things and people. And that sounds quite harsh in the fact that we're going to control someone to do what we want them to do. And that's what the word management means. And we can see in project management, it was used in risk management, change management, benefits management. All these are parts of projects. Then the waterfall methods, sometimes seen as sort of a hierarchy. So they're sort of predictive methods. They're the ones which we started with, and in the 70s, 80s, these were the well-known methods, and it was like a sequential method, but they were associated with people who know what they're doing at the senior level and those who don't know at the junior level. So it was more kind of authoritarian sort of leadership, and this kind of person may remind you of that kind of leadership style which was being used. And although, you know, in the waterfall, the predictive, you can change leadership styles, it was sort of branded as if it was like, we have to do whatever the hierarchy say. Until sort of Toyota came into the equation, where they brought in lean, what's called lean, and the lean influence or lean thinking. And they sort of said, well, we want to empower the people. So this little video demonstrates that empowerment.
The Toyota production system is the foundation of what Toyota do. Every single member here has the right to stop the line. If he sees something that's not quite right, we have what we call the hand-on system. He has the right to stop that line. Everybody's involved in it. It's not just top down. We encourage, as we call it, bottom up. So if a team member comes to me and says, I have an idea for this, you don't ignore it. There's nobody has a better idea than that member. The biggest asset we've got is the guys that work here. And it's not because you cut them open and they're like a sticker rot and they've got Toyota through it. That's not it. It's just the amount of faith and pride that the people have got. And they will do what they can to help this company because they know it's helping them at the end of the day.
That was a sort of major influence into the way we're thinking about leadership. So, and the person even said that they were empowering the person on the bottom line to actually stop the whole factory if they saw a problem. And it was better to sort something out at the beginning when it occurs, as opposed to letting it go out to the customer. Because then, especially that cars with Toyota, they were getting a lot of rework with people coming in, and that was affecting their brand. So what they were trying to achieve was a pursuit of perfection. So perfection was like reducing waste. And they did that by using these pillars like just in time, not having too much inventory, jidoka, these sort of Japanese words for certain things, so like harmonized intelligent automation. But then the key word there is empowerment. So we're actually empowering people to be able to make decisions. And that's where the agile world really sort of like picked up on and said, well, we want to take sort of the lean thinking and apply it to our project management. So you can see then the agile world sort of came in with this collaboration where they're helping each other, they're working with each other around the table. There's no one person who's going to be completely in charge of everything. So, and that's sort of more adaptable, so we can change with the environment. You see, so two main sort of divisions came in, or approaches, which were waterfall and agile, and those are the things you've probably heard of. And but if you looked at this waterfall, this first one, see, that's actually in Singapore airport, and it's actually inside the airport, so there's no wind or anything changing the direction. So the waterfall was sequential. So they caught the sort of these project management methods caught onto that sort of thinking and said, well, it's a bit like a waterfall. We never really go backwards because we know we're clear on what we want. So we go to certain gates or stages. We then decide, yes, it's worth carrying on, then go to the next one. But if you look at the next waterfall.
This is power, energy, force.
This is actually Niagara Falls, and but even though it's outside and it's influenced by the weather, the wind, the force of the water, in this case, the requirements are so strong that they're regulatory and people can't change them easily, or they're very crystal clear. So waterfall methods work when you've got a regulatory project where everything's required, or you've got clear requirements where people can say, yes, at the end, I want this. Whereas if you looked at this last waterfall, so that one, you can see the requirements may not be as clear and they may be changing. So the customers always change their mind about something because they don't really know exactly what they want. And that's where the IT industry was really good for, because not everybody knew what IT could do. So as time was evolving, or time was going on, people were coming up with ideas, but then changed their mind. And that's where if the requirements aren't very clear, you're going to get this iteration. So that word iteration came along. So the waterfall was going down there, but we had to go and go back, and then iterate, then go back, and then iterate, and then go back. So it wasn't like clear requirements or regulatory requirements. So that's why this iteration word came in, and it was associated with the agile methods. If you looked at this crossroads, you can see in a predictive, we would close all this off. So all this area would be closed off, and the construction company will be then saying, well, give us a few years to build this. They'd build all that, and it wouldn't really matter if they started here, there, or there. As long as they finished in the end, that's all they're concerned about. So if something happened where they couldn't get the materials or something, then they could work on this bit or that bit, and it was up to them what order they did it. But then other people said, well, is it not possible to hand us over something? So the incremental method came along where they said, okay, let's build this road in its entirety, and then let's build that road in its entirety, and we can hand this road up as increment 1, then that one increment 2, then let's join this one together, and that becomes increment 3. So we do things in increments, but we're still using the predictive approach. Then adaptive came along and they said, well, let's clear the whole area and let's just build a mud trap through, which is going to be the profile of the whole road, so people could use it if they wanted to. Then let's put some gravel on. If more and more people are using it, let's put gravel on, and then let's put the tarmac on if we think there's a demand. So the adaptive is saying, well, let's see how it goes, and if people want it, then we'll carry on. If people don't, we'll stop and we don't waste any more money. And you can see then that the predictive, incremental, and adaptive, predictive can be incremental and adaptive can be incremental. So incremental is like the common factor here. So incremental can be done in either an iterative way or a predictive way. Look at this, you can see the 3 musketeers. And in project management, there's something called the triple constraint and the iron triangle. But if you looked at the 3 musketeers here, how many are there? There's actually 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 musketeers, but they call them 3. And it's the same with the project management. They call it the triple constraint or the iron triangle, but there's actually 4. There's cost, which is a constraint, time, which is a constraint, and quality. But scope is what's variable, and scope can be sometimes called requirements or features. And that's where some agile methods got those names. So feature-driven development, and then requirements were how many requirements can we do for this project. And time, cost, and quality was fixed. So agile world wanted to say more certainty on time, because they saw that projects were just always going beyond time, and they couldn't, and they were always going over cost, but they always delivered everything. So they said sometimes you don't need everything for it to work. Therefore, the time and cost are more important. And the APM came up with, and PMI came up with these sort of life cycles. So they use the word concept, which is why, that's the initiating group. And then the next one will be how, and that sort of definition, define it. Then the what, the making it is deployment or development, and closing it is stop what you're doing. And then using it is the benefits realization. So a typical life cycle would be just these words: why, how, make, stop, and use. But then the different methods we can see use slightly different words. And we're going to have a quick look at a typical life cycle. You can see here the person wanting to cross a river has an idea because they're getting their feet wet and they don't want to get their feet wet. But then the Forth Road Bridge in Edinburgh, this is the first, the fourth there. And then before, the cars used to go all the way around like that. And even sort of, but there was a railway bridge, but not a road bridge. So in the 60s, they built a bridge to go across, and that then met the demand. And they would have done PESO, like political, economic, and social, all those considerations. So this is called a prompt list. And there's many in project management where it prompts you to consider something. But the business case would have been written for the bridge, and they would have said, well, what's the scope of the project? What's the, if we do nothing, what's the options? Do minimum? What are the benefits we're going to get? And what are the major risks? And what's it going to cost? The investment appraisal. And of course, the reason why are we doing it? This would be the sort of the end result where we've got the bridges. That's the railway bridge, which is this one. And then you've got the original sort of road bridge, which is that middle one. And then this is the new one, which was built in the last sort of 10 years, 10, 15 years. And when they're designing this one, they got to a point where they thought, well, yes, we're going to replace this middle bridge with this one. But then when the designers got into more of the calculation, they realized that the width of the bridge, if they made it any wider, would double the cost. So they then decided that it's better to have both bridges, and we distribute the load, and they then kept all three. So then we want to go on to actually how to, if we decide that there's a good business case for it, we want to then define how we're going to manage it. So how we're going to manage change, quality, and that's all done in the project management plan. And in the Agile world, in Scrum in particular, they use what's called a Scrum guide. And the Scrum guide tells you how the rules of the game. And this project management plan, again, tells you the rules of how you're going to manage that particular project. And the PMP will be specific for that type of project or that particular one. So you can cover any project at all, whereas the Scrum guide can only do certain ones. There you can see it being built. And if you did that in an agile way, imagine if you ran out of money now, you'd have to build that and say, well, that's my car, and it's going to bounce over like that. So you know that that can't happen. So there's certain projects which have to be done where the scope is not flexible. So if you run out of money, then you're not going to be able to use it. So you need to make sure you've got contingencies in place. But then finally, some projects hand over like this. So obviously we don't want to do that. We want to actually review what the project objectives were. We want to have team performance measurements, lessons learned, and reviewing the quality of it. And then finally, sort of reviewing against the original business case. So we want to hand over in a more formal way when we finish a project, instead of just walking away. You can see the benefits there. So it's at some point they finished the bridge, and then now saying, look at how many cars are passing. They could measure that. They could measure the loads of the bridge. All the things which are part of the benefits will be measured at this point over some period of time. But I did come across an agile bridge, and this was where time was fixed, cost and quality, but the scope was variable.
The bridge is that way! You're not thinking that.
I sure am, boy. Ever heard of Evel Knievel?
So you can see that a bridge, unless you're James Bond, you wouldn't really be able to use that bridge. So bridges and things of certain projects where the scope cannot be variable, then the agile methods would not be so appropriate. This is the PMI processes, and I mentioned the initiating group at the beginning, planning group, executing and monitoring. That's like the development, and then closing. But you can see all the processes like develop project charter, identify stakeholders, and all these processes we need to consider each one, and each of the processes has inputs, tools and techniques and outputs involved in them. And as a project manager, you have to know each one of those and be able to apply them at the appropriate times. And then looking at that graphic again, this is the timeline. We've got in the 70s, the central or the Office of Government Commerce wanted a method specifically for IT. So they came up with this thing called prompt. So prompt was projects, resource, organization, management, planning techniques. And that was also OSGC, which was the SSADM, which was the structured systems analysis development method. And that was specifically CCTA. And there's a lot of acronyms there, which is the Central Computer and Telecommunication Agency. And that's basically where the prompt came, and then Prince came from that. So projects in CCTA environment, and then Prince they changed the C to a controlled because it could be used in any environment, not just the CCTA. But you can then see that this was a waterfall method, and then later on, as time went on, the spiral came in, and that was using more sort of iterations in the risk of the projects. And then RAD was rapid application, and Crystal methods, which we'll have a look at in a few minutes. And then you got JAD, which is joint application, so getting people together. V model was more of a waterfall. And then we'll look at DSDM, Scrum, and then XP was one of the methods derived from those, and then FDD, feature-driven development, and RUP, and we're seeing the predictive, incremental, and adaptive. You can see this structured systems analysis design method. This was the approach from the CCTA. So CCTA, which is Central Computer Telecommunication Agency, and they use a waterfall approach because it worked in the construction industry. But you can see, yes, it was good, and it sort of covered feasibility, current systems, IT, business systems, and then logical design, physical design, and that was all, you know, the mainstream or mainframe computer programs. But when IT became even more popular, there were loads of different products being created, and they needed a bit more of an adaptable approach instead of this waterfall. Prince2, like I mentioned, projects in controlled environment. This is actually version 6, so that's the 6th edition, and this is the 7th edition, and that includes the people now. So you can see from Prince, Prince was mainly the projects in CCTA environment. Prince2 is controlled environment, and start with version 1. And it's a bit like the iPhones, iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4. The difference between iPhone 1 and now is amazingly, they're like 2 different products. It's the same with Prince2. They want to make it more clear as time went on, so that's why they've been changing the versions. The agile mindset came up with the way that people think about the evolving solution. So you've got like the values, the principles and practices. And this agile manifesto came about in the early 2000s. And it basically said individual interactions are important. So the things on the right-hand side here, these are all important. But what they're really trying to emphasize is try and do these first. If those don't work, then revert to this side. So individual interactions was really the Crystal method, was a major input into that element, because Crystal methods were using more individuals and interactions as opposed to following certain processes. The working product, this used to be called working software. So they're saying it's much easier if you've got something physical to use as opposed to read a document, and collaborating with the customer instead of negotiating contracts and then responding to change instead of following the plan. So this was a manifesto, and these were the different methods which came about. And you can see depth of guidance here, and then the life cycle. We've seen what a life cycle is, and you can see Scrum is very minimal on life cycle, but it can be used anywhere. Kanban can be used in a feature driven. All these can be used anywhere in the life cycle. Then the DSDM approach we'll look at in a second, and disciplined agile and Crystal methods. So these are the sort of like a bit more guidance on it, and less is really more, because less means that it's large scale Scrum. And then you've got the lean, which we looked at just a few minutes ago. Disciplined agile was bringing in different methods, different agile methods, so mixing methods together and being more disciplined. And that was where, if you found Scrum too narrow focus, and RUP, which is the or Agile UP, Agile Unified Process, that was too prescriptive, then a combination of those will be called disciplined agile. And then the Crystal methods made reference to different people. So you have a crystal clear, which is more kind of like a small team, and then you've got crystal yellow, a few more people, so 6 to 20. And then you've got a number of people, and you've got like life-threatening projects where you can have like safety critical types, and they gave you sort of some idea of using different types of crystal colors. And then the DSDM model, and we saw earlier on the life cycle and the feasibility in the DSDM model would be there. And that's feasibility, and this would be basically the feasibility would be like the concept. So that'd be concept. The foundation would be like the definition. And then instead of development, they've got the word evolutionary development. And evolution means we're evolving over time. And then deployment is the handover. And then the post-project is the actual benefits. You've got the 8 principles, and they got that from the 12 agile principles, and they're saying focus on business. So that's our goal. We deliver on time, so we time box everything. We've got collaborate, and they got never compromise the quality. Then build incrementally from firm foundation, and keep going back, and then develop iteratively. And that's basically saying we're going to do this, develop there, and we're going to design, develop, and test all within 1 to 2 days. So that's iterative development, so people can see what we're doing. And then you've got instrument success factors like transparency, iterative development, and all those which are going to allow us to be successful. Then you've got the actual flow of the different documents. So you've got the business focus, you've got the solution focus, and then the management focus on those. And then looking at Scrum, DSDM is sort of in the middle. You've got the sort of the restrictive methods, which are more comprehensive, and you've got the speedier ones, and that's just in time. Or sorry, just do it.
Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
So you see, just doing something is better than waiting to do all the documentation and then starting. So if you do something, you can learn quite quickly from what you've done. You can see if something works or it doesn't. And the Scrum framework was basically saying, well, we're going to have 3 artifacts, 3 roles, and 5 events. And the 3 artifacts will be the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. Whereas the 3 roles are Scrum Master, Product Owner, Developers, and the events will be Sprint Planning, that's 1 event, then the Daily Scrum 2 events, then you got the 3 there, Sprint Review, that's reviewing the product, and then 4 there. And the sprint itself, the whole sprint itself, will be the event 5. And basically the Scrum Guide only says that. It's 13 or 14 pages, and it just explains what each one of those is. And but the pillars of Scrum are transparency. So we need to be transparent so we can inspect, and then we need to adapt. And this is like where they got the wording from.
The hip joints, slender head, and bendy tongue all help the gerenuk survive in its environment. Features that help organisms survive are called adaptations.
So basically, in the Scrum environment, they're saying there's no point, if you don't adapt the solution, there's no point having transparency or inspecting. So what they're doing is, Scrum is called an empirical process control, where we learn from observation and experimentation. So by doing something, we adapt the solution. So just like evolution. So they got that word from like the general sort of evolution. And then these are the different roles. And you can see that in the Prince2 world, project manager will be here delivering something to the project board, the executive, and the executive will be the people responsible for the money, senior user the benefits, and senior supplier of how. But in the agile world, they've got the snowman, or sometimes they call the agile alien child. They've got the business sponsor here, they've got the visionary and the technical coordinator, but they've got the project manager in the head, and the solution development team are actually in the body. And you can see that line between there. The project managers now in the agile world gone to the more senior level of facilitating. So they don't actually do the work on managing the project, i.e. the day-to-day. The solution development team are self-organizing. Scrum took it a bit further and sort of had an out-of-body experience. And effectively they said, we don't want the head. All we want is that body, and that body can fit into any framework in the organization. And that will be the corporate. So corporate could have a Prince2 project, a DSDM, and a Scrum project going on all at the same time. And then the final sort of takeaway will be predictive is like sometimes called linear, sequential, or waterfall, and it's got more of a hierarchical leadership. And it's good for when the requirements are clear and we know exactly what we want at the end. And it can be done in any environment. And also the end user won't get to use it until the end. Whereas the adaptive one is sometimes called iterative or evolutionary, and it uses more collaborative leadership and something called servant leadership. They also want time, cost, and quality fix, whereas scope is variable. And they also get something early on to use, and they get more frequent look at what the end product will be. Agile needs a sort of culture set up in the organization, one which is of trust and no blame culture. And then a bit more on all the other methods can be found, like on the PMI, the PMP qualification, or the CAPM, and the APMG is the Agile DSDM, and Scrum.org do the Scrum Master, and Prince2 outsource and people. So these are the main qualifications which cover all the things I've been talking about in the last sort of 30 minutes. And that sort of comes to the end of the sort of presentation. I know it's quite quick, but they're the key elements of all the methods.
Jack, thank you so much.
Okay,
That was
thanks.
brilliant. So much information. Thank you to
Yeah.
everybody who's attended. Jack, if you have a couple of minutes, we can hang around
Yeah, sure,
and maybe do Q&A if anybody's got any questions while Jack's still on the call. Feel free to either come off mute. I will stop recording now, actually. So
Yeah, sure, yeah.
if that helps.